it or not, the idea of another Brexit referendum appears to be in play. Enough MPs think it's a useful last resort to dealing with the gridlock that it can no longer be ruled out. But for many, it would not just be wrong to vote again, it would be an outrage. Several Brexiteer commentators have suggested they would personally boycott such a vote in order to deny it any legitimacy. One of those is Daniel Hannan, Conservative MEP for South East England. He's on the line now. I'm also joined by Heidi Allen, Conservative MP for South Cambridgeshire, who's in favour of a second referendum. Very good evening to you both. So Daniel Hannan, if it did come to a second referendum, you would just say, I'm not going to take part, it's all a charade.
Well, I think that would be the only option. I mean, think about it. We were promised before the first referendum by the government, by the Remain campaign, in the clearest possible language that this was it, there'd never be another go. In fact, the people who made that promise most aggressively, funnily enough, were Nick Clegg and John Major and Paddy Ashdown. You know, I'll never forgive people, even if it's a majority of one. And Nick Clegg saying there'd be people fighting on like those Japanese soldiers on Pacific Islands. So if those same people then turn around, having made all of those promises, and say, actually, we want another go. I mean, well, best of three, best of five?
Suppose it was a little different. Like sorry to interrupt, but suppose it was a little different. Suppose it was specifically the deal versus Remain versus no deal. So you were actually looking at specific options now rather than abstract options. That is different, isn't it?
Well, but that makes it even worse. So I've said, in principle, I don't think we should play the game of legitimizing what would be plainly a bogus referendum put forward in defiance of all the arguments. But if you're then talking about a question that was deliberately loaded, which is what dividing the Leave vote would mean, or worse still, putting a choice between Theresa May's deal, which most Eurosceptics regard as worse than Remain, or Remain, so that effectively there's no Leave option on the ballot paper, then that's an extra reason not to legitimize the process with our votes.
Let's put that to Heidi Allen. I wonder, Heidi Allen, whether you could see a scenario in which Brexiteers could, if you like, undermine a second referendum by just saying, well, we're not playing that game.
Possibly, but hey, guess what? This is about the future economy of our country. It's not a game. And that's why those of us that are reaching, sadly, to the conclusion that this might be the only option are considering it in the first place. I know people are nervous about it. You know, grandpas and grandsons are still having arguments over the Christmas dinner table about Brexit. And I appreciate how worried people might be as to how divisive it could be. But the matter of the fact is, we now have facts in front of us with what the deal looks like, what that will mean for the economy, what the risks, the pros and the cons, what's good, what's bad, what's indifferent about it. Democracy is only alive if we're having that trusted conversation with our constituents, with the people in this country to say, do you want this? Democracy didn't end on one day in 2016.
Just talk me through how you would react if the turnout, suppose, was quite low, and some suspicion was that maybe a small number of Brexiteers had decided to boycott the vote, and it was a somewhat indecisive result. Would that matter if the Daniel Hannans and Charles Moore say we're not going to vote?
I think it would be a real shame because, democracy is for everybody. It's not just for those on any particular day. But whatever the result would be, even if it stayed as it was and people do accept, we like the sound of this deal, we're going to take it, then that's absolutely fine. So, I don't hold the argument about best of three, best of four. The point is, people would be voting on the known rather than promises and the unknown, and that's the critical thing that I think the public have the absolute right to have a say on.
Dan Hannan.
That really is extraordinary to listen to. So what we're basically being told is, we know we said this last time, we know we promised it last time, but this time we really, really, really promised to accept it, which is just preposterous.
But sorry,
why should we listen to calls for a second referendum?
Then.
But by definition, people calling for a second referendum do not accept referendum results. So why on earth should we listen to them now?
But Daniel Hannan, you have to admit that Brexit hasn't turned out as it was sold, right? I mean, so the public they may not have, but they might have believed what they were told. And so it might be reasonable to check with them, because they were told it would be easy to get a deal, and you're advocating now a no-deal Brexit, which is a long, long way from what was sold at the time.
And the main reason why it's proved difficult is because the European Union has never really been convinced that it's going to happen, precisely because they keep being told by British Remainers that if they hang tough and maintain the line, then they will manoeuvre until we get a second referendum. This is an extraordinary thing, because what it would mean, if it went ahead, is that Britain, which exported parliamentary democracy to the world, would be exposed as an oligarchy, and a country that had been an inspiration to many as a cause and defender of freedom would have been face down in its bid to recover its own independence. And that, I think, would be a humiliation in the eyes of the world from which we wouldn't recover for decades.
I think it would be the absolute perfect opposite of that. I think it would be the most phenomenal display of democracy that this country would be trailblazing, that's saying we talk regularly to people, we trust them, we give them the information, we allow them to make their own decisions rather than just cracking on and doing what we think, even if we think it's economically suicidal. That would be the biggest possible boost for democracy in this country, and I'd be proud to export it around the world.
And Heidi Allen, just to be 100% clear, you would never support revoking the referendum result, revoking Article 50, actually to kind of cancel Brexit without another referendum, because the people voted for it. They would have to be the ones who change their mind.
I don't know. In dark, really troubled moments, I have thought, goodness me, maybe if I was Prime Minister, would I just, put my head above the parapet and say, enough now, this isn't good enough. I can't have this in my name. And when I have bold moments like that, I've probably got a glass of wine in my hand. But honestly and truthfully, I think you would need to ask the British people, because this is about involving them in the decision making.
Can I just get you both to comment on news that's just come in? It's that Jeremy Corbyn's just told the House of Commons that he intends to table a motion of no confidence in the Prime Minister, not in the government, in the Prime Minister, making it personal. Daniel Hannan, would you vote for that motion if you were an MP? Motion of no confidence in the Prime Minister?
I think I'm afraid that moment has passed. I would have opted for a different policy, and I think that would have required a different person who wouldn't have made it all about, border control, who'd have gone for a more Swiss-style solution. But I think the moment for that has passed now.
So you would vote against Jeremy Corbyn's motion if you
yes.
were an MP? You would.
Yes, and I suspect most, if not all, Conservatives will.
Well, Heidi Allen, you can give us the answer to how you would vote, because you're one, I think, who wants the meaningful vote brought forward so Parliament can get on with other things.
Yeah, because we're just wasting time, and it's desperate. I think it was Luciana Berger in the debate this afternoon remind us that I think 34 days now further will pass before we have that vote. I mean, this is serious stuff.
And how would you vote in that no confidence in the Prime Minister vote?
Oh, I would totally vote against that. That's not a question at all. I supported the Prime Minister last week, and I would do it again. Can I ask? Obviously, I've missed that bit of news, being standing here with the headphones on, because he's changed his mind a few times on this. When has Jeremy Corbyn said he's going to do this?
I know. I've just seen it's just flashed up on the wires.
Okay.
It's just flashed up. He's just said it in the comments.
And give it half an hour, change his mind.
So, but in a word, you have confidence in the Prime Minister for those purposes.
I think for those purposes, yes. I think she is still, despite I don't agree with the deal, but I think she's doing the very best that any Prime Minister could.
Heidi Allen, Daniel Hannan, thank you both very much indeed. Let's get